The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello and welcome to The People's View. My name is David Schoneman. I'll be hosting this episode. People's View is a program that is put together by the Nashua GOP Committee, and it's designed to bring a conservative constitutional perspective to some of the issues that we're facing around the nation, here in the state, and even here in the city. We are now 1 week after the New Hampshire primary for 2020, and there's a lot going on. We're kind of digesting what happened last week and what it means for the race this fall, and seeing perhaps a microcosm of the national scene in our own state house right here in Concord. With me today to talk about this is Steve Negron. Steve, welcome. Thank you very much. I'm glad to have you here.
Nice to be here.
It's always a pleasure. You definitely have a lot of experience in the state.
Yeah.
You were in the State House for a while, and you ran for Congress a couple years ago, and you're going to run again. You are running again this year?
Again. Yep.
So that's very exciting.
Yes, it is.
We wish you the best in that.
Thank you.
But you've obviously been keeping very close tabs on what's going on nationally, because even though we're here in the state of New Hampshire, and representation of the folks here in New Hampshire is very, very important.
It is.
But we got to see what's going on nationally. And with the primary last week, we see things happening that maybe are a little surprising or a little not so surprising.
Right. It was great. You know, one of the things about having the first in the nation primary, and it came on the heels of what we saw in the Iowa caucus, which was a bit of a debacle for
oh my goodness,
for the entire state of Iowa, primarily for the Democrats, because they were trying to find, and our President Trump did very well in the Iowa caucus. But, you know, one of the great things about this state, about being the first in the nation primary, is that it brings all these people, and it brings about $50 to $60 million of revenue into the state, you know. And so they were down in Manchester, and I was down there a couple of times on this thing called Radio Row, and talking to different talk shows. It was really quite fascinating to see all these people that you normally see on television, all these political pundits, and they're walking around just like they're normal people, which they are.
Yeah.
So it was interesting for us. You know, we had a turnout, and I was at the Trump rally the Monday before up in Manchester.
Very exciting, I'm sure.
Oh, it was amazing. One of the things, and I had gone to the one in August, is that our president just brings out every walk of life. You know, so the mainstream media wants to tell you that, you know, he's labeled, you know, whatever phobe, whatever, you know, pick your ilk. But everybody was there. Every walk of life was there, every age.
It's very interesting what he does. I understand that he's not taking his salary. He gets paid, but he's giving it away. He's not a career politician.
Right.
And even though he's done the business work, he owned an airline for a time being, all these things that he's done, and the average person hasn't done those things.
Right.
People can identify with him because he identifies with them.
It's
so
true.
He's like one of us.
Right.
And you look at that difference in economic position among some of his supporters and him, and from between me and him.
Right.
And yet he's able to bridge that divide, and he makes it very clear that he is representing us. He is there for us, not for himself or for some agenda.
Right. He doesn't have
I think
to
it's
be.
great.
It is good, you know, and I think a lot of times he feels, and he says sometimes those things that we feel, but either are not in a position to say.
Right.
So it's a very refreshing thing that when you hear a president talk for an hour, you know exactly where he stands. Where previous presidents, they could talk for an hour and you walk away like, I have no idea what they just said.
Yeah.
So I think the president brings a breath of fresh air, which absolutely just makes the other side of the aisle just apoplectic, right? Because they don't believe in what he's saying. They believe that he's self-serving. And look, the man has done unbelievable things in the 3 years since he's taken over office, despite all the obstacles and the handicaps that have been thrown in his way. And I think that he is that person that speaks for the everyday Joe or the everyday Mary. And I think that's refreshing to a lot of people. Certainly, when you look at that crowd, it was over 12,000 people, you know, in the SNU Arena, and the energy in that room is just amazing.
Yeah.
And so, and then you see how many people came out in a primary to vote
Sure.
for our president, set record numbers.
Yep, that's right.
And I think our state is a bellwether, and I think you're going to find that that the turnout for this president is going to be at record levels because they absolutely believe that he needs to have another 4 more years in the office.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Right.
I've reflected periodically on what has made America great. And one of the things, you look at other countries, even European countries,
Sure.
more socialist or really communist countries, and I think all human beings are kind of made a certain way. We are made to thrive in a particular kind of environment, like a plant. My wife's a gardener.
Right.
She puts a seed in the ground, and she gives that seed what it requires in terms of heat, moisture, and light, and it thrives. If she puts a different seed in there or does something different for that particular seed, it's not going to grow.
Right.
Human beings, I think, are similar. We're made to be entrepreneurial. That's how we are. We think about how am I going to get what I need with what I have.
Right.
We take risks. We like independence, but we also have relationships. All these things are kind of in flux. But the U.S. system, put together by the Founding Fathers, took those things that were innate in any human being and built a government that satisfied those needs.
Right.
And people loved it and they thrived. And as time has gone on, government has taken over more and more of that control, particularly with the Democrats whenever they're in control. And it kind of stifles people.
Sure.
And it's like that seed that just can't grow because the water and the light and the heat are just wrong.
Right.
And then along comes President Trump, who strips all that stuff away, and he gives that seed, gives us what we need to thrive. And not only do we thrive, but we feel differently. We don't feel differently about him.
Right.
We feel differently about ourselves and about our lives. And that's a life feeling I want to give to my son, Isaac. I want to make sure that he knows that he's got a future. So Trump, I think, connects by responding to basic human needs. And these things resonate. So someone might walk out of there and say, I'm not really sure why I like them, but I really like them.
Right.
Because there's something in them that responds to the kind of environment that he's trying to create that facilitates human beings thriving.
Absolutely. It's a connection that he makes with every single person in that audience. I was up at CPAC last year, and he spoke for 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Wow.
And it felt like he was talking to me. And I've had the fortune of living abroad, growing up as a military dependent. So I lived in countries that didn't have the freedoms that we have here. I lived in Spain when there was still a dictatorship, where you want to talk about no civil liberties at all. Right. And then you come back to the States, and I lived in Europe for 7 years. And you come back, and then you have a different perspective. And I think that we now feel that the flag is flying truer now. That there's a sense of pride.
Good way to put
once
it.
again. And even though we do have some discourse between ourselves and this radical party, I don't even want to call them Democratic Party, because I tell you what, I would welcome the old Democratic Party back to the table, right?
Yes.
We could sit down. We may disagree about the size of government or about the type of social programs, but we could talk about it, come to a mutual agreement, and then move forward. We, unfortunately, at this state, are past that right now, and now it is it's adversarial, and I don't know. And despite all those things I said earlier, the president is still getting some phenomenal legislation through. So it's a sad state, and that's why when you look at even in our state level, what the state Democrats are doing in the House and what they're doing in the Senate. So it is, and I don't know what the playbook is. I try to understand, I really do, Dave. I try to keep an open mind. But when I've lived in a country that was under rule of a dictator, and I see and hear people saying that the government will tell us what's right and what we need, that's time for all of us to stand up and take a stand. I mean, we came, we won't be ruled by tyranny. We had a situation, unfortunately, a week ago in Wyndham. I don't know if you heard the story. Young 15-year-old was there. He was there at a Trump tent, and he was just saying, thank you for voting. And this young man slapped this 15-year-old who was a member of Antifa, and he was a member of the other party. And, I shake my head and say, what is it that you're trying to tell me? You may not agree with me. I get that. That's fine. But come to the table and let's just iron out our differences. And we're not doing that right now. Certainly, our current representative is not doing that for us. We were talking before the cameras rolling that, she backed Pete Buttigieg. and Pete Buttigieg, along with Mayor Donches, believe that we should get rid of the Electoral College. And if you just saw the thriving nature of our state and the first of the nation, anybody who wants to get rid of the Electoral College and they have an understanding, our state would just be rendered meaningless. And so in a presidential year, nobody would come to New Hampshire. There wouldn't be a first in the primary. You lose that revenue, and we would become insignificant in the election of a president. And
as would most states.
Right.
It's going to boil down to California, New York, and
there's
Ohio, and
12
Illinois,
states,
something like
all
that.
those 12 states that will get you to the 270, right, which is the minimum that you need to win the presidency. And that's 38 others that don't mean anything.
Right.
And I just don't know how somebody can go to Washington and say that they're representing us and be backing somebody that wants to put your state in the backseat and never talk about you again. I just don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get that either. I think it's wrong. I think
It is wrong.
What she's doing and what Buttigieg is proposing, these things are just wrong. What's interesting, too, I think, is that in New Hampshire, Bernie Sanders won.
Right.
Just as he did last time.
Right.
And here's someone who's a radical socialist. So that kind of speaks to where we're at as a nation, too, because it looks like we could possibly have Trump, who is so much for the individual,
Right.
and then, again, Sanders, who is so much for the collective.
Right.
It's a huge, huge divide. I, too, would welcome the Democrat Party, because the Democrat Party would be somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle.
The old school Democrat
Absolutely.
Party. I got friends who are Democrats, and we talk about, I got friends who are Democrats.
Sure.
We certainly have family
Right.
friends who are. And they, I think, are aghast at some of the things that are going on. The candidates that they supported were much more moderate, but their candidates didn't win. It's this
Right.
extreme side.
Right.
And so there's more and more central control coming, more and more stifling of human initiative
Right.
coming if these people succeed. And one of the elements to that success would be the abolition of the Electoral College.
Right. Right.
So that could contribute to that success or that disaster. Or it could be a product of what happens if they get in control. And
Right.
It's a big mess.
When you look at our constitutional republic has always been a work in progress, right? I mean, when you look at the founders, and number one that surprised me is how young they were, right? They weren't 60-ish men that had just
Nothing wrong
15
with
years
that.
of experience. Not at all. They were, I think the oldest one, I remember saw an article that was 42, but they were 20-year-olds and young 30-year-olds. And so they had a belief and a view of how this country should go. And I think, it was very special. And you look at any other country that has tried a socialist attempt, there is a 0% chance of success.
Right.
It's just, it's out there. The most recent is Venezuela.
And it boils down to violence, because the only way they can enact what they want to do is through violence.
It is.
And so when that guy attacks that 15-year-old at the polling station, well, he's just living out what he's hoping to live out.
That's right. And it's funny that they will label conservatives that we're the ones that aren't the ones about inclusiveness.
Right.
And like, Reagan famously said, if you agree with me 80% of the time, you're not my enemy.
Right.
Now what you see, the rhetoric is you have to agree with me 100% of the time or you're my enemy. And it's just, I think, and I've had a lot of friends of mine we have different opinions in the political spectrum, and they're old-time Democrats, and they shake their head. And they say, it's clear that you look at what people are proposing is not at all what this country was founded on and what's in the best interest of this country going forward. And of course, you have these people that say, like Elizabeth Warren, the 2%, tax the top 2% of their wealthy. I mean, look, all those people on there have made a great living. And I find it disingenuous,
Right.
When you got a guy like Tom Steyer, when you got a guy like Bernie Sanders, who's now part of the top 1%, it's very easy to sit back and throw stones from a pulpit, right? When you have to, first thing to do is you have to look in the mirror and say, you know what, Mr. Steyer, you were very successful, but you had a framework in which to capitalize on that success. And what you're doing now, it's easy for you to say tear it down, but you're already past the finish line.
Right.
Right. I would love to
Taking
have
away everyone else's chance. Meanwhile, he's already made it.
He's already made it.
Yeah.
Right. And then of course, then you have Bloomberg, right, who's trying to buy a president,
he
and
is.
he's going to be on the debate stage tonight.
I wonder how he's going to do.
I got to tell you,
I think he's going to crash and burn.
I love watching the debates only because one of my favorite movies is The Godfather. Michael Corleone famously said, "You keep your friends close and your enemies closer." And just to see, what they're spewing, and Bloomberg is going to be this wild card that's going to be out there. And everything that Bernie Sanders says it shouldn't happen, Bloomberg is. Everything that Tom Sayers says you shouldn't do, Bloomberg is. So there's going to be this civil war within the Democratic Party.
Right.
And I just think it's going to be fascinating to sit back with some popcorn and watch what happens. So
yeah, I don't see that the momentum that Bernie has, these Bernie supporters are going to move over to Bloomberg because he's the opposite.
He is.
And if Bernie has cultivated in these people, this belief in a movement and all that sort of stuff, and communism and all this stuff, socialism, whatever it is, they're not going to abandon that and suddenly go to what Bloomberg says because maybe they think, well, Bloomberg's more electable.
Right.
I don't think that's going to happen because they are they're ideologues. I mean, they are focused on the ideology that Sanders is preaching, not on Sanders' electability.
Right.
They're focusing on his ideology, and that's what they're going for.
And it shifts, right? It's really funny. You look at those of us conservatives, I think we've had some pretty tried and true planks in our party as to who and what we are, right? And those hasn't really moved much. If you look at what's happening right now on the former Democratic Party, it's shifting sands. And so, you have some people that everybody's trying to out-left each other. And I think pretty soon, and I got to tell you, I honestly believe that a lot of them don't believe what they're saying. I in my heart of hearts, they know they got to say it because they're in for a pound, in for a penny. So they can't get out of it now, right? Yeah. They are too far down the path.
They are so far down the path.
And so they have to finish the playbook with the way it is. But I don't believe anybody really believes, except for Sanders. And Sanders is the first one that is self-professed. He said it, that he's a Democrat.
I think he's probably the most honest guy out there.
He is the most honest guy out there. And you look at what he's done in his life, coming from Brooklyn, New York, right? People need to realize he's not a Vermonter. He's not a New England guy. He's a Brooklyn, New York native. Moved to communes in Vermont in the 60s, actually kicked out of a couple of communes in the 60s. And he's always been that person, and he's at least has not changed his stripes. So you know what he is. Right. Everybody else now is trying to glob onto that train and move left. When all those other ones, when Cory Booker was out there, and Kamala Harris and all those people, they wanted to say, even Beto O'Rourke, they wanted to say something that would just shock somebody to believe, well, he's got to be the furthest left. And it's like this leapfrog. Pretty soon, you're going to be so far out there that there's no way in the general that you're going to be able to come back.
It's going to be very, very hard.
Very difficult, Very hard. And you're going to lose some people that like some of your ideas, but then believe that you're just, a wonk way out there. And I think that's what's happening right now. They're going to go so far to the left. And quite frankly, I think our president is going to have a field day on a debate stage with them.
I think so too. One of the hot button issues, of course, is abortion and right to life. And you said something about Senator Birdsall having some legislation in Concord.
Yeah, so she
tell us about that real quick.
Absolutely. So I don't want to mislabel what the bill was, but it was like the Born Alive bill, right? So you had this Virginia governor that is putting forward legislation, as is their legislative body, that says in the event of an act of an abortion, the baby is born alive. Right, so it's actually birthed and out of the mother. Then it's up to the doctor and the mother to determine what they're going to do with the child. They can either leave it there to die, not provide medical care, because it was in the act of the abortion, right? So, I mean, we can have a debate about what other people believe what is a human being. I tell people all the time that in the medical field, if the lack of a heartbeat constitutes death, then why doesn't the presence of a heartbeat constitute life?
Makes good sense to me.
I mean, very simple, but they're going to get wrapped around an axle. So Senator Birdsall, a great senator, put some legislation in, and the Democrats killed the bill. Okay. And I guess I'm trying to understand, are you killing the bill because in the House of Representatives in Congress, there is almost quintessentially the same bill, and they have administratively blocked it from coming to the floor over 70 times. And Congresswoman Custer has been among them that has voted to block it. And okay, if you want to talk about the issue of life in a mother, let's just do that. I guess I don't understand how you extrapolate that to now having a birthed human being, and you're trying to keep the same argument.
It's the ideology you were talking about before. They're just moving further and further to left. They're trying to out-left each other.
Right.
I think it was Buttigieg, if I pronounce his name correctly.
I think that's correct, yeah.
Mayor Pete, who said in one of his events that essentially that there's no room in the Democrat Party for someone who's pro-life. Is that correct?
I think It may have been him, but I heard that same thing. You
Okay.
know?
So there is no room any longer in the Democrat Party. They aren't any kind of a spectrum. They're just a very thin slice
Right.
of America. And I think Trump has the rest of it.
Right.
Trump has everybody else, and the Democrats just have this thin slice. So I know some strong pro-life Democrats.
Sure.
Who are maybe more the moderate Democrat.
Right.
Who voted for more moderate Democrats in the primary. What are they going to do?
Right.
I wonder.
Yeah.
When it comes, are they going to vote for someone who will favor infanticide?
Right. And that's exactly what we're talking
getting
about.
rid of
Yes.
the Electoral College?
Yes.
Just to have that Democrat? I'm not sure what they're going to do.
Right. And I think what we need to look at is that, let's if we don't win these seats as Republicans, which I think we're going to do very well, then you look at some of these radical Democrats like AOC, like Ilhan Omar, like Presley, Massachusetts, and like Tlaib from Minnesota. There are Democrats running against them.
Yes.
And primarying them. There are
lot
Republicans.
for AOC.
A lot of them. Because, there comes a point in time where, you need to stop saber rattling and realize that is not the party. That is not the Democratic Party. And I think, AOC was stumping for Bernie Sanders. And even she was saying sometimes Bernie doesn't go far enough. So, if we want to maintain what this country was founded on, and it was founded about life and liberty and life and the pursuit of happiness, then the things that the former Democratic Party are trying to do is trying to take away those very basic tenets of who we are as a country.
Yeah.
And I think Democrats are rising up as well.
I hope that they are. It really depends on the voter when it comes down to it.
Correct.
And I still look at our primary results here and I see that Sanders won in New Hampshire.
Right.
So what does that say about the New Hampshire Democrat voter?
Right.
If someone who was more moderate had won in New Hampshire, I would say, okay, well, the New Hampshire Democrats are not buying the AOC trend.
Right.
But maybe they are.
Well, you look at it,
Or maybe still just hate Trump.
I believe there's such an anti-Trump vote out there that you sometimes can't even, and I'm sure you've experienced yourself, Dave, you can't have just a legitimate discussion about somebody when you bring up just the word Trump. Right. The defense mechanism goes up, shields goes up. It's no, doesn't matter. You're an idiot for believing in the president. There's no way to logically have a discussion with some of these people because of their vitriol for this president. I think Bernie Sanders did as well as he did is because I think there's a huge influence from Vermont. Up in the Connecticut River Valley, which is an obstacle that I'm going to face when I take on Ann Custer, right? Because that's a stronghold for them against the Connecticut River Valley.
Right.
I think you've had a lot of influx from Massachusetts up here, but when you I don't do the assessment or an analysis on the numbers of the Democrats. We're just trying to figure out where we're at. But I think that there are going to be people that say, okay, it's just a primary. We believe, and I think there's a soft spot in people in New Hampshire for Bernie because of what the Clintons did to him. I
think that's probably true.
And I believe that they
really messed with him.
They did
badly.
and
badly.
if you're going to lose.
Right.
Don't stack the tables.
Right.
The cards against your own party member, which is clearly what they did. Wasserman and did that, and Donald Brazile. Giving questions. I mean, there was even within the party, and I think that kind of, not to use the word, that kind of sickness within a party is going to tear it apart. And I think we're going to see a little bit of it tonight on a debate stage. I think you're going to find that you got a guy who believes that he can skip the 4 early states and just wait for Super Tuesday and buy his way into the election when everybody's criticizing, about big money in politics, them primarily. It's funny that they're screaming the loudest from the top of the mountain,
right?
But don't peek behind the curtain.
Right.
It's fascinating to me that they're able to do that.
Yeah.
But they stay on message, which is, they're very organized. And so, last election, we had 115,000-ish registered Republicans stay at home, did not come out in the midterm. I think half of those people come out. We don't lose the House here in New Hampshire. We don't lose the Senate. We don't lose the Executive Council.
It's very important for folks at home to be involved.
Absolutely.
We have to vote.
We have to vote and get out
important.
because there's going to come a point in time when you get up in the morning and you look in the mirror before you look outside and you don't recognize outside anymore, right? Then you need to go back to say, could I have done any more? Could I have been involved in any other way to prevent what could transpire if we don't get involved.
And no
in
one
this.
should think, especially here in New Hampshire, which is a small state, that their vote doesn't count.
Oh, absolutely.
You probably had some close margins in
We
some of
did.
your elections,
Absolutely.
and I had very close margin when I won first time for Board of Aldermen.
Right.
5 votes.
Right.
Out of 1,000 votes cast. Not a lot of votes, 1,000 votes cast.
But
5 votes made a difference.
I can tell you
5
what,
votes.
Secretary Gardner tells this story that in 1974, here in the state of New Hampshire, the United States Senate race was decided by 1 vote.
Really?
Yes, sir. So that's the example I use.
that.
1 vote.
Yeah.
1 vote. So it is important. You know, we're at a point in time, we're at a nexus where you can't say, well, my vote doesn't matter.
No.
Because your vote does matter. And for all those that are out there, you have to go out and exercise your
Especially
right.
here in New Hampshire.
Especially here in New Hampshire, because you set the stage. You're like the guy in track that runs out there and sets the pace. And people follow this state. And so
They do.
I would implore everybody, and all the Republicans in the state of New Hampshire, to get involved, help candidates that you support, get out there, and especially in the primary, and more importantly in the general, and to help our president keep the 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
And how can they help you? Tell us a little bit about your campaign, where you're at, what we're
sure.
doing now.
So, there was a lot of excitement over the last week with the primary, so that's gone. And now we're ginning up. You can go to my website, www.negron4congress.com. It's in transition. We're changing providers, so it's under construction, but should be up in the next day or so. Our current campaign office is at 71 Spitbrook Road.
Is that where you were last year?
I was on there last
yeah.
time. We're on the office on the back instead of the front.
Okay.
It's open. We'll take some help. We have an opportunity here to take back the 2nd congressional seat, which Nashua is the largest city in the 2nd congressional, and to get good, not perfect, but good Congress people into the House, and the same thing in CD1, and to help this president, and to have somebody who's a voice for the state of New Hampshire.
And that's what's really key. I think we need to have representatives who really do represent us.
Right.
Not who are trying to represent their party ideologies.
Correct.
And joining all these things, whether it's working to abolish the Electoral College, which is destroying New Hampshire.
You're destroying
so here's
New Hampshire.
Our New Hampshire Congresswoman.
Right. Right.
Who's working actively against us.
So and we
can't have that.
Not at all. And that's a great point. We have to make sure that she has to answer to us as to why she thinks that we're not that important for her to go to Washington and to promote us and defend us.
Right. Well, Steve, we're almost out of time here. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you
Best
very
of
much.
luck with your campaign.
Thank you
Want
so
to have
much,
you in
David.
again in the
Please
course
do.
of these next few months.
Yeah.
And we're going to follow what you're doing, and I hope folks get involved and hope they come out and support you.
Thank you very much.
Good luck with that.
Thank you very much.
So thanks for coming in.
You bet.
And thanks, folks, too, at home for tuning in and watching The People's View. I'm David Schoneman, your host, and I'm here with Steve Negron, candidate for U.S. Congress. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.